There's a strange feeling some people experience, a sense that this existence is their final round, as if they've seen it all before and are on the verge of transcending to something greater. What if reincarnation isn't just an endless loop, but a system with an exit? Some souls might be experiencing their final human embodiment, reaching the culmination of countless lifetimes before breaking free from the cycle of rebirth. Edgar Cayce, often called the sleeping prophet, dedicated his life to understanding these spiritual transitions. Through thousands of recorded readings in trance states, Cayce described reincarnation not as punishment, but as opportunity, each life offering new chances for soul growth until, eventually, certain souls complete their earthly lessons. But how would you recognize if you're one of these souls? The signs are subtle, yet profound. Before we explore these indicators, let's understand the concept of life cycles more deeply. Many spiritual traditions suggest that consciousness undergoes repeated births and deaths until achieving a certain level of awareness. Interestingly, modern quantum physics has begun to support aspects of this ancient wisdom. If time isn't linear and consciousness transcends physical limitations, then reincarnation might not be sequential, but simultaneous, all lives happening at once from different perspectives. Cayce's readings frequently emphasize this non-linear nature of soul progression. He suggested that souls don't simply advance forward, but eventually step outside the illusion of time altogether. The signs of a last life soul, therefore, might not indicate traditional spiritual advancement, but rather an awakening to the constructed nature of reality itself. The first sign that you may be completing your final cycle is feeling like a stranger in the human experience. Despite fully engaging with life, forming relationships, pursuing goals, participating in society, something within you remains separate from it all. You can immerse yourself in daily routines, yet it feels as though you're observing from a slight distance, like an actor playing a role that doesn't quite fit. This isn't detachment born from depression or disassociation. Rather, it's a profound recognition that the material world isn't the complete picture. While others seem deeply invested in acquiring status, wealth, or power, you recognize these pursuits as temporary constructs, important within the game of life, but not defining ultimate reality. Edgar Cayce described this phenomenon in reading 28422, where he explained that souls nearing completion of their earthly cycles often experience a form of cosmic homesickness, a subtle yearning for something beyond material existence. This sensation isn't escapism, but recognition, like remembering a truth you've always known but temporarily forgotten. This feeling aligns with emerging theories in consciousness studies. Some researchers now propose that what we experience as self might be a temporary projection, a focal point of awareness rather than our true nature. Those completing their final incarnation aren't lost souls. They're the ones closest to remembering their original state of being. The deeper this awareness grows, the more the world begins to feel like a vivid dream from which you're gradually awakening. Nothing truly belongs to you, and you don't fully belong to this reality. You're simultaneously in it, yet not entirely of it. If reincarnation exists as a learning process, why would some souls reach a point where they no longer feel bound by its lessons? Perhaps because the ultimate realization isn't about accumulating more wisdom, but recognizing that spiritual growth itself was part of the illusion, a necessary construct until it's no longer needed. Is this description resonating with you? Has that feeling of being a compassionate observer rather than a desperate participant always been part of your experience? If so, you might be witnessing reality from the perspective of a soul completing its final cycle. The second trait of souls in their final incarnation manifests as profound déjà vu experiences. Unlike the momentary familiarity most people occasionally feel, your déjà vu episodes are vivid, frequent, and often accompanied by specific knowledge you couldn't possibly possess in this lifetime alone. Edgar Cayce's readings frequently addressed this phenomenon. In reading 29821, he described how souls approaching liberation experience bleed-through from other timelines, moments when the veil between incarnations temporarily thins. These aren't mere neurological glitches, but glimpses of a multi-dimensional existence your consciousness is preparing to fully embrace. You might find yourself knowing exactly how conversations will unfold before they happen, recognizing places you've never visited, or possessing skills you never formally learned. This cross-timeline awareness occurs because the barriers between your various incarnations are beginning to dissolve. Quantum physicists have recently proposed models suggesting that time may not be linear, but rather a field of possibilities existing simultaneously. If correct, this would mean your past lives aren't truly past at all. They're happening concurrently, with your consciousness simply focused on this particular expression. As you approach your final cycle, that focus becomes more fluid, allowing momentary awareness of your other expressions. The third indicator is a fundamental shift in how you perceive mortality. Unlike the instinctive fear that drives most human behavior, you experience a calm acceptance of death. This isn't nihilism or depression, but a deep, peaceful recognition that physical transition is simply another doorway. When Cayce was asked about souls completing their final cycles, he explained that they carry subconscious memories of previous deaths, not as traumatic endings, but as transitions between states of being. This remembrance gradually neutralizes the primal fear response, replacing it with tranquil awareness. You might notice this manifesting as an unusual comfort with the topic of mortality, an ability to discuss death openly without the typical emotional distress, or even occasional recognition that you've experienced death before. This perspective fundamentally changes how you live. When the fear of ending no longer drives your choices, you're free to experience each moment for its inherent value rather than its perceived permanence. The fourth trait appears as synchronicities that defy statistical probability. While coincidences happen to everyone, your life seems woven with meaningful patterns that respond to your thoughts and intentions with uncanny precision. You think of someone, and they call. You need specific information, and it appears. You feel lost, and perfect guidance arrives unexpectedly. These aren't random occurrences, but indications that your consciousness is beginning to interact with reality at a more fundamental level. Cayce described this phenomenon as souls developing co-creative awareness, the ability to shape experience through intention rather than merely responding to circumstances. This emergence of synchronistic flow correlates with fascinating discoveries in quantum mechanics. The observer effect demonstrates that consciousness itself influences physical reality at the quantum level. As a soul completing its final cycle, you're not just experiencing the universe, you're participating in its continuous creation. The most profound aspect of this trait is recognizing that the universe isn't happening to you, it's responding with you. Reality becomes less rigid and more conversational. This isn't magical thinking, but emerging awareness of the interconnected nature of consciousness and physical experience, a perspective Cayce described as essential for souls preparing to transcend the reincarnation cycle. With each synchronicity, you're receiving confirmation that you're aligning with a deeper current of existence, one that flows beneath the apparent randomness of physical life. These moments aren't rewards, but remembrances, gentle nudges awakening you to your participation in reality's unfolding story. The fifth trait, marking souls in their final incarnation, is an unusual relationship with desire itself. While most people are driven by perpetual longing, always seeking more wealth, achievement, validation, or love, you experience a profound sense of completion. This isn't apathy or resignation, but a serene recognition that external pursuits cannot provide what you already possess within. You've likely noticed this manifesting as a natural falling away of ambition without effort or resistance. Goals may still arise, but they emerge organically rather than from a sense of lack. You pursue them with presence rather than desperate attachment to outcomes. This shift often puzzles those around you, who may perceive it as lack of drive, when in reality, it represents profound spiritual maturity. Edgar Cayce addressed this state in reading 1824-1, describing how souls completing their earthly cycles experience a natural dissolution of karmic bindings. According to Cayce, the reincarnation cycle continues primarily through attachment, desires, aversions, and unresolved experiences, creating energetic bonds that draw consciousness back into physical expression. As these attachments naturally dissolve, so does the compelling force of reincarnation itself. This completion doesn't mean your life lacks purpose, quite the opposite. Without the restless seeking that characterizes most human existence, you're free to act from authentic presence rather than compensation for perceived incompleteness. Your actions arise not from hunger, but from fullness, creating a distinct quality of being that often inspires others without conscious intention. The sixth sign appears as an intuitive recognition that physical reality isn't the foundation of existence, but a projection or expression of something more fundamental. You sense the constructed nature of everything you perceive, not as intellectual concept, but as lived experience. This awareness often begins subtly, perhaps noticing how your perceptions shape your experience, or recognizing that sensory input represents only a tiny fraction of available information. The solid world gradually reveals itself as energy in constant flux, interpreted through the limited filters of human sensory apparatus. Cayce referred to this as veil thinning, the progressive recognition that material reality is more like projected light on a screen than the source of that light. This isn't dismissal of physical experience, but contextualizing it within a larger framework of consciousness. Fascinating parallels exist between this ancient wisdom and cutting-edge physics. Holographic universe theories propose that three-dimensional reality may be encoded information projected from a two-dimensional boundary. The simulation hypothesis suggests similar concepts from a computational perspective. These scientific models echo what mystics have described for millennia, that material reality emerges from deeper informational fields. For souls completing their final cycle, this isn't merely theoretical. You likely experience moments when the constructed nature of reality becomes immediately apparent, when the world briefly appears as patterns of energy rather than solid objects, or when the artificial division between self and environment momentarily dissolves. The seventh characteristic emerges as recognition of your fundamental nature beyond identity. Rather than experiencing yourself primarily as a separate entity with fixed attributes, you increasingly recognize identity itself as a useful but temporary construct, like a character in a play rather than your essential being. When Cayce entered his trance states, he described awareness beyond personal identity, what he called the superconscious state, where individual selfhood dissolves into universal consciousness. In reading 2533.8, he explained that souls in their final incarnation naturally begin accessing this perspective while still embodied, creating a dual awareness that sees both the individual story and the larger context simultaneously. This isn't self-negation, but expansion, recognition that what you truly are extends far beyond the boundaries of name, form, history, and personality. The I becomes transparent, revealing itself as a focal point of universal awareness rather than a separate entity. The eighth trait manifesting in souls completing their final cycle is profound, universal empathy that transcends conventional boundaries. Unlike typical compassion, which remains rooted in separation between self and other, you experience a visceral recognition of interconnection with all living beings, feeling their joy and suffering as extensions of your own experience. Edgar Cayce described this state in reading 36451 as cosmic consciousness, awareness that recognizes all life as expressions of a unified field rather than separate entities. This isn't merely intellectual understanding but lived reality. The suffering of others becomes as immediate as your own, making service a natural expression rather than a moral obligation. You likely notice this as spontaneous compassion arising without effort, extending beyond human relationships to animals, plants, and even seemingly inanimate aspects of existence. Conventional boundaries between species, kingdoms, and even the living and non-living world begin dissolving in your perception. This isn't sentimental projection, but recognition of the conscious presence animating all forms. This expanded empathy manifests practically as natural ethical behavior without need for rigid moral frameworks. Your actions increasingly align with universal well-being, not through discipline, but through recognition that harming others is, quite literally, harming aspects of yourself. Cayce emphasized this trait as essential for souls ready to transcend the reincarnation cycle, noting that genuine liberation cannot occur while consciousness remains fragmented in its perception. The ninth and final characteristic appears as spontaneous liberation from repetitive patterns, psychological, behavioral, and relational cycles that previously seemed inescapable. Without deliberate effort, you find yourself naturally outgrowing compulsions, addictions, and limiting beliefs that once defined your experience. Cayce referred to this as karmic completion, the natural conclusion of learning patterns that have persisted across multiple lifetimes. In reading 19085, he explained that souls in their final incarnation often experience accelerated resolution of long-standing patterns, sometimes working through in months or years what might otherwise require multiple lifetimes. This doesn't manifest as perfect behavior, but as a fundamentally different relationship with imperfection. Rather than remaining trapped in repetitive struggles, you move through challenges with increasing fluidity, extracting their essence without becoming entangled in their drama. Learning occurs with remarkable efficiency, without the stubborn resistance that characterized earlier developmental stages. You might notice familiar triggers no longer producing habitual responses, relationships naturally transforming without the power struggles of the past, or long-standing fears dissolving without formal therapeutic intervention. This isn't bypassing difficulties, but integrating them at their roots, addressing causes rather than symptoms. As these 9 traits converge in your experience, a profound integration begins occurring, not as dramatic transformation, but as gentle remembrance of what you've always been beneath the accumulated layers of conditioning. The boundaries between spiritual seeking and everyday living gradually dissolve, revealing ordinary existence itself as the sacred journey you've been pursuing all along. What happens when a soul completes its final cycle? Cayce was careful not to define this experience in concrete terms, suggesting that it transcends conceptual understanding. He described it not as disappearance, but expansion, consciousness returning to its original unlimited state while retaining the wisdom garnered through its embodied journey. Whether you recognize several of these traits in your experience or simply feel drawn to this exploration, remember that spiritual development isn't a competition or achievement. The recognition of these qualities isn't cause for spiritual pride, but invitation to deeper presence with whatever arises in your experience. If you're indeed completing your final cycle, this understanding doesn't separate you from others, but connects you more deeply to the collective journey. Your awakening doesn't remove you from humanity, but enables you to participate more fully in its evolution, bringing presence to the beautiful, challenging, and utterly mysterious experience of being alive. What traits have you recognized in yourself? Share your experiences in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more explorations of consciousness, spirituality, and human potential. Until next time, may your journey be filled with presence, regardless of which cycle you're experiencing. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more profound spiritual insights and wisdom from Edgar Cayce and other mystics throughout history. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our weekly explorations into consciousness, reincarnation, and human potential.